Hi, welcome to another edition of Sara and Chaya's Kitchen. We are making challah. Last month we made whole wheat challah and it actually was delicious. But people then reached out to me and asked if we can do the regular good old white floured challah for this month. And so I said sure, because the truth is Shabbos, you light Shabbat candles, make kiddush, and then you just feast on delicious, hot, warm, white challah. That is the best, right? I mean, I really like whole wheat, but I get it. I totally get it. So this week I found a recipe from the New York Times, and it just looks like a really good, easy recipe. It's a one bowl recipe, like I call it a one bowl wonder. And all the ingredients are here. So let's go through the ingredients. We call it the mise en place, and we talk about this all the time, that I make sure I have all the ingredients placed out so that I know what I have, it's already properly measured, and I'm not stuck mid-recipe where I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm missing an ingredient or I don't have enough of something. So I'm prepared beforehand, and like every time I cook or bake, I talk about Instacart. Thank God for Instacart, right? And so I can just quickly Instacart and then start the recipe then. So I'm well prepared. Okay, are you ready? So I have my bowl, I have my wooden, hopefully non-breakable spatula, wooden spatula. I have a whisk. I already pre-measured everything, so let's go through to make sure that you have the proper ingredients. 1.5 tablespoons of yeast, and I keep my yeast in the freezer in a Ziploc bag. I buy a very large bag. I think it's a 32 ounce. It's a 2-pound yeast that I buy at either Walmart or Smart and Final. And I stick it in the freezer and it lasts as long as it lasts. So until there's nothing left. So it really keeps it fresh. Okay, then I have 1 3/4 cup of room temperature water or tepid water. And I have sugar. So I have 1 tablespoon sugar, plus I measured a 1/2 cup. And that gives it the sweetness and the flavor for the challah. Okay, I have a 1/2 cup of oil. And I'm using, it calls for vegetable oil. I generally don't like to use vegetable oil because a lot of the ways they extract the oil from the vegetables or from the seeds is not healthy. And uses a lot of chemicals. So I only buy my oils from a natural store. So either Whole Foods, Sprouts, Traders. I like this one, it's kosher. It's an OU and it's sunflower oil, and it's high heat, which means you can fry with it as well, when you fry judiciously, right? No judgment, but this is great to use for frying. You won't use olive oil for frying. Okay, then I have 4 eggs. I already checked them individually, and I have 1 egg that I'm going to use for the egg wash that I put on the side. I'm not going to use that now. The reason why I check the eggs separately is because a blood spot is not kosher. So if there is a blood spot, and if I happen to open up all the eggs and then I found a blood spot in the last egg, then all the rest of the eggs are not kosher. So I do 1 egg at a time. I check 1 egg in a container like this, and once I see that it has no egg, has no blood spot, I'll pour it in, and then I'll do the next one and pour it in. And this way, all my eggs are good and I don't have to worry. Salt. Salt is probably one of the most important ingredients in a challah recipe. I always add more than what they say because salt is really what gives the challah flavor. So it called for 1 tablespoon of salt, and I used about 1.5 tablespoons. The salt that I use is kosher salt, and I use the Diamond kosher salt. I don't use the Morton's because it's much saltier. So if you have the Morton's and you use that, then don't do more than 1 tablespoon because it will be too salty. Okay, and then better for bread flour. I keep it in a container. I have it marked that it's better for bread because better for bread and all-purpose looks exactly the same. So who would know, right? So here are my ingredients. We have everything here, thank God. And we are going to start. Ready? So the first thing we're gonna do is Chaya is my yeast pourer. 1.5 tablespoons of yeast. Chaya, pour in my water. 1 3/4 cup of water. Isaac, do you see the ingredients being... A great idea while you're cooking is to have either a garbage bowl or an area where you can put your dirty dishes so that it doesn't clog up your working area and you keep your surface clean and neat and organized, and you can see all your ingredients very easily. Now I'm gonna add 1 tablespoon, Chaya, 1 tablespoon of sugar. Now the 1 tablespoon of sugar will feed the yeast and allow the yeast to grow, right? You wanna make sure that the yeast is housed in a warm, comfortable environment, right? Like anything grows in the right environment. It needs water and food, and the food is the sugar. I'm actually gonna use the back of my measuring spoon to just kind of do a little, break up the yeast just a little bit. I'm trying not to be a helicopter parent, so I'm trying not to overmix. It's very challenging for me. Typical Jewish mom. I like to be right in my children's faces. So I did a little bit, and then I am backing away and allowing my yeast the space and the environment to grow. As soon as I start seeing little bubbles, so I'm starting to see some little bubbles. As soon as I start seeing the little bubbles, I know that my yeast is alive. What I like about this recipe, there are some recipes where you can stick all the ingredients together at the same time and just knead. The problem is that it is convenient, but if the yeast is not alive, then it won't rise and it won't give you that glutinous, yeasty, stretchy, delicious challah. So I do like a recipe where you first poof the yeast, because now I have an ability to kind of check and make sure that the yeast is rising. And if the yeast is bubbling, and if it doesn't, it's not a huge deal because I'll pour it out and start my recipe again, as opposed to waiting until everything is in and then saying, oops, doesn't look like it's working. Okay, so this looks great. I see already it's starting to kind of bubble. See? So now you'll see how beautifully this yeast bubbled. See all the bubbles, and the water kind of got white and bubbly. I think we're good. Okay, let's start adding the rest of the ingredients. Ready? Okay, let's start adding oil. 1/2 cup of oil. I used 1/2 cup of sunflower oil. And I'm using my whisk, and I'm gently whisking the ingredients. Okay, let's add the eggs. Okay, Chaya, add the eggs one at a time so I'm able to incorporate it. The idea is to mix the yolk and the white so that you don't have globs of yolk or just strings of the white. Okay, doing a great job. Okay, 2 so far, 2 down. I also actually like pre-measuring so that I don't lose count, because sometimes while I'm baking I get distracted and then I forget how many eggs or how many cups of flour or how many tablespoons of this or that I put in. So I like pre-measuring so that I don't have to think that much while I'm doing it. Oh, I'm trying to break this one. Okay, Chaya. Next one, last one. There you go. Okay. The eggs are, ooh, this one's escaping. Okay, perfect. Let's add in the rest of our sugar. So it's 1/2 cup, right? Because we used 1 tablespoon of sugar to feed the yeast. And now for flavor, we're going to add another 1/2 cup of sugar. Yes, all the sugar. Good job. I am all of it. And so at this point, I'm still using a whisk because it's all liquid. Once we start adding the flour, I'm going to switch to my wooden spoon. Okay, let's move this away so that, okay, now our salt. So let me just tell you about the salt. We add the salt last before we add the flour. And that's because as soon as you add the salt in, the yeast stops rising. The salt creates boundaries, right? You need a little bit of discipline, that's the salt, but mostly the sugar, which is mostly love and sweetness. But in order for us to really appreciate the sweetness, we need to have a little bit of the salt. That brings in all the flavor. So I'm about to add the salt. Once I add the salt, I'm creating a boundary so that the challah doesn't fluff all over the place. The never-ending growing yeast, right? Okay, so I incorporated all the ingredients. Isaac, you got it? And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start adding the flour. So I'm gonna add in 8 cups of flour. Okay, so like I mentioned before, my trick with flour is that I add it slowly because you can always add flour, but you can't take the flour out. And the idea is to have a soft, fluffy challah as opposed to a dense, heavy challah. So the more flour you add, the denser the challah, the dough is gonna be. So it calls for 8.5 cups. As soon as I see a recipe with like a fraction at the end, I eliminate the fraction in the beginning and I'll add it slowly. So instead of adding 8.5 cups, I'm gonna add 8 cups. But I probably am actually gonna start with 7. I'll start with 7 cups of flour. You know, the flour absorbs into the liquid differently depending on the weather, depending on the temperature of your hands, depending on the temperature in your kitchen, even depending on the temperature of the ingredients. So let's start with 7 cups, and this is better for bread flour, which has more gluten in it. Okay, 1 cup, keep going. Okay, here's where I lose count, so everyone's helping me. That's 1 cup. 2 cups. 3 cups. 4 cups. Okay, already I see that the dough is getting thicker, but I'm still able to mix it with my spoon. What is this, 5? 5 cups. Are you counting? You know, okay, 5 cups. Okay, it's starting to really come together. 6 cups. Okay, hold on. Let's just kind of incorporate this. You're getting what it looks like, the dough? 6 cups. Oh, it looks like a really nice dough. Okay. Let's do 1 more cup of dough, 1 more cup of flour, and what I'm gonna start doing is using the best utensils in any kitchen, and that is your hands. Okay, thank you. Yes, clean hands are the best utensils in the kitchen. So now I'm starting to use my hands, and I'm going in and I'm incorporating the rest of the flour. I'm actually really happy that I only used 7 cups because I can't imagine having used more. It seems that the nice thing about bread is you don't have to actually level off the flour. You don't have to measure it the same way you would with cake. You have a little bit more leeway, but that's also why you start by adding less. So usually when you measure flour, you'll scoop it lightly in and then you'll take a knife and run it across and level it so that it's an exact measurement. Like if a cake asks for 4 cups of flour, but for bread, for dough, you have a little bit, but you don't have to measure the same way, but just start off adding less. So I'm glad we only added 7. Okay. Chaya, you want to try? I'm trying to kind of get all the pieces. It's actually a very nice dough. So as you knead, you use your fingers as the scoopers and your palms as the pressers. They work beautifully in tandem together. And the idea is to create a beautiful round ball of dough. So it's sticky. As you knead, you'll notice that the dough becomes stickier. So this is where you'll add a little bit more flour. A little at a time. You got it, Chaya? Okay, here's an idea. Chaya, give me your hands. You can spray your hands with with oil so that it doesn't stick on the dough. So I don't usually use canola oil except if I get it at a health food store like Trader's or any of the other ones. There's actually a lot. I think Gelson's is pretty healthy, and Lazy Acres, and Mother's Market. I just went to Mother's Market. It's actually a pretty cool market. Anyway, so I always have sprays in my avocado oil spray. Make sure it has no additives or parabens or any of this. All this has is canola oil. And it's the healthy expeller press canola oil, so they don't use chemicals. You got it? Okay, this is looking excellent. Wow, Chaya, you have magic hands, Kanai Nahara. Look how beautiful. This is really nice dough. Wow, it came together so beautifully. So the longer you knead dough, the more gluten you create. So when you make a cake, especially when you make muffins, you barely mix, right? They say mix until combined, and then you stop because you want the muffin to be kind of crumbly and break apart so you can eat it with your coffee, right? Challah, on the other hand, you want that glutinous, stringy bread sensation, and that's what you get when you use A, gluten flour, high gluten flour, and B, when you knead. So we keep kneading. I feel like my upper arms are getting an excellent workout. And there's something so therapeutic, so visceral about baking bread, right? It's Hashem's gift to us. It's God's gift to us. It's man can live off bread and water, right? And so it's our very sustenance. And so we want to show God our appreciation for the gifts he gives us every single day. So now what I'm going to do, look, good job. How beautiful is this? Wow, thank you, God, right? This is, how did this even come like this? Who told us that yeast is supposed to rise? God did, right? That flour comes from wheat stalks and turns into something beautiful like this. Who gave us that idea? It was all from God. So thank you for all of that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow this to sit and rest and rise till it's double in size. So I take my bowl. Here's my handy canola spray, and I'm going to spray all the way around. I'm going to place this inside. I'm going to spray it again, and the reason I'm spraying it is so that it doesn't stick to the walls. Then I'm going to take, thank you, Chaya, I'm going to take a kitchen towel. I'm going to make it just a little bit wet, almost like I'm steaming it, just a little bit. And then I'm going to place it on top, and I'm going to put it in the warmest part of my kitchen, and I will let it sit for about an hour. And then we'll come back together once it rises. We'll say the blessing, and we'll pray. The world needs our prayers now more than ever, right? To protect the people of Ukraine who are escaping now. God should protect them. Men, women, and children, they need all our support and all our prayers. And then we will make challah, and we will be able to enjoy it for our Shabbat dinner and lunch. Okay, so now we waited about 2 hours for the challah to rise. Let's take a look at our beautiful challah dough. Wow, so it's definitely doubled in size. You can also, by the way, stick it in the fridge and allow it to rise overnight, and then take it out, let it come to room temperature, and then shape it. Okay, so before we take this out, I'm going to do a few things. Firstly, I have 2 very well-loved baking trays. I am going to put 2 pieces of parchment paper on. Perfect. Okay. Perfect. Okay. Put them on the side. I'm going to preheat the oven to 350. Press start. Okay. So now all my prep is done and I can start with this dough. Before I start braiding the dough, the first thing I want to do is turn this dough into something holy. I'm going to turn it into challah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off a piece and I'm going to say, Zos challah. This is challah. It actually is a commandment in the Torah, in the Bible, that says that when you make a certain amount of dough, usually using 5 pounds of flour, you say a blessing on a piece of the dough and you turn the entire dough into challah. So I actually only used half the amount. So I'm going to say the blessing, but I'm not going to say it with God's name because it's officially not enough flour or dough to be able to make the real blessing. But I can still thank God for giving me the opportunity to acknowledge that He is part of every aspect of our physical and spiritual and emotional life. And so I'm going to make the blessing. And this mitzvah is very specific for women. You know, women have 3 very special mitzvahs. One is to light Shabbat candles. One is making challah, and one is going to the mikvah once you are married. And so we are now doing, that's why Chaya is here to help me, because this is a mitzvah specifically for me and for Chaya. And we're going to say the bracha. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahafrish challah. Thank you, Hashem, for giving us this ability to acknowledge that you are part of every aspect of our life, and without you, this dough would never come to be. Now, I'm going to actually say a prayer. This is called an Eis Ratzon. This is a time, a very, very powerful time, where women can break the barriers of heaven and ask for anything. I mean, we can always ask for anything, and our voices are always super powerful. But when you make challah, it's 10 times as powerful. And so I'm going to start off by asking God to bring Messiah. We need Mashiach now. We need peace in the world. We need the perfect world, but not what's happening right this second. I want to send blessings to Ukraine, that the people in Ukraine should get out safely and they should be able to live in their homeland safely, and that everything works out on that side of the world, because I don't know about you, but my parents come from Russia and my parents come from Ukraine, and it's devastating to watch people suffer. Our people suffer, humanity suffer, and so we ask God to please send peace, and please send peace all over the world, and Israel should have peace, and everyone should live safely and happy and healthy, and all of us should be healthy and happy and successful in all that we do, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Okay, amen. I'm going to put this on the side. I'm actually going to wrap it in aluminum foil. In the time of the temple, they actually gave this to the high holy priests. Since we don't have the temple in Jerusalem, I'm going to wrap it up, and I'm actually kind of going to give it like a sacrifice. I'm going to put it in the oven and allow it to burn, so the smoke from the dough reaches up to heaven. Okay, now this is holy. Now this is not just any dough, this is challah dough. Okay, I'm going to actually break it into pieces. And Chaya, you're going to take a piece, and I'm going to take a piece, and we're going to braid. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 3 equal parts. Full disclosure, I actually stuck this in the fridge for a little bit, so it is a little colder. If you don't stick it in the fridge, it's going to be a little bit more malleable and a little bit and more stringy when you pull it apart. But once you bake it, it's going to be excellent. Okay, so I'm rolling them out. So Chaya and I are rolling them out. 3 equal, first I did 3 equal pieces, and now I'm doing 3 equal snakes. And my trick is that I feel like bigger challahs take longer to bake, and then the outside gets crusty and the inside is still raw. And I don't know about you, but raw challah dough is just not a thing for me. So I actually make smaller challahs so that pretty much every bite you take has a crispy outer crust, and the inside is perfectly baked. Okay, Kaya, how you doing? Okay, I have pretty much, listen, it's home, it's not bakery. You know, the bakery challahs are perfect. And every once in a while I used to say, oh, I wish I could make a bakery challah. And then I thought, if I want a bakery challah, I'll buy a bakery challah. So I like my challahs to kind of be a little rustic and a little uneven. There's something homey about homemade challah, right? So I stopped worrying about making sure that it's perfect. Okay. Chaya has perfectly little challah. Those are so good. They're all so crispy and crusty. Okay, so I'm gonna attach the top, and I'm not gonna attach it too tight because sometimes I wanna kind of fix it to make it more even, so I reopen it. So I'm not gonna do it too tight. I'm gonna spread them out, and I'm gonna start braiding. And I kind of braid it tight. How you doing, Kaya? So I'm kind of doing it tight, and if you notice the top kind of open, but no big deal, because what I'm going to do is flip it over and then just redo this one so that it's more even. Here you go. Wow, it's adorable. Hello, Mr. Challah. Look how cute that is. Okay, I'm going to put this here, and let's do another one. Hi, ready for another one? Oh, you have more dough. Yeah, so I think this recipe calls for 2 challahs, but I think that's 2 really large challahs. So I don't want to, you know, as we said before, I don't want to make really huge challahs, so I'm going to make, here, 3 even balls. Let's do another one, and then I'm going to show you how to do an egg wash. More dough. Perfect. By the way, what you can do, more, here you go. What you can do is, if you see that it makes a lot of challah, you can actually bake the challahs and bake them just a little bit under. So you start seeing color, but it's not really golden yet. Take it out, let it cool, wrap it in aluminum foil or plastic wrap, then stick it in a Ziploc. They make the 2-gallon Ziplocs, or if it fits the 1 gallon, use the 1 gallon. Stick it in the freezer, and then next week, take it out Friday morning, let it come to room temperature, and stick it in the oven, and your whole house will smell delicious, and you'll have challah for 2 weeks instead of just this week. It's the challah that keeps on giving. Okay, we're doing it again. This one came out smaller. They actually rise in the oven, so that's good too. I'm gonna flip it over again. Whoa, make it, yes. And here we have another challah. So I like this. Make sure that we kind of leave space because they will expand. So what I'm gonna do now is, before I egg it, I'm gonna let it sit for a half hour and just let it rest to allow the dough to kind of create glutens again, because you know, when you play with it, you kind of want it to rest for a little bit after. So before I bake it, I'm gonna let it rest for a half hour. Then we're gonna egg wash it. We'll put some toppings on, and we'll stick it in the oven. Okay, so now we waited a half hour, and the challahs doubled in size, and they had a chance to rest. So we're gonna glaze it. You know how the challah comes out all shiny? Yes? And toppings actually stick when you put the egg on. So I put the egg on, A, to make it shiny, and B, so the toppings stick. Okay, so this is what I do. I got this at the dollar store for $1. You can also get a paintbrush at any art store. Just make sure you haven't used it for paint. An egg. So I'm gonna check the egg. And all of a sudden I made this egg holy by checking it to make sure it's kosher and there's no blood spot. Okay, now Chai is gonna add a little bit of honey, because honey does 2 things. Firstly, it makes it deliciously sweet. More. We're generous with our sweetness. Perfect. So firstly, the honey adds a lot of sweetness to the top. Well, not a lot, but a good touch. And number two, it also adds color because when you add sugar or honey to the top of something, it bakes quicker and it gives a really nice hue, a really nice color. So I'm just kind of trying to incorporate the egg and the honey together. You can use a fork. Just a side note, to not place your honey in the fridge. Keep your honey in a cabinet, and I actually keep my honey in a plastic, I keep the container in a plastic container so that it doesn't warp the wood of my cabinet. Because when the honey drips, sometimes it warps the honey. I keep washing the outside of my honey because I really don't want to grab it when it's sticky, but don't put it in the fridge because when you put it in the fridge, it's harder to use. It gets very hard. Okay, Chaya, ready? We're gonna start brushing. And when we brush the challah, we make sure we get inside the crevices so that when it goes into the oven and it spreads a little bit, it will still be shiny. So I'm gonna just do as much as I can. There are people who in the middle of the baking, as the challah gets really large, they'll go back in with the egg wash to the corners so that all the parts stay shiny, but I never remember to do that. But if you really are particular with the top of your challah, you can do that. Okay, Chai, you do these. And I'm gonna add, there's two things to add. I found this za'atar in Traders. How cool is that? So I'm gonna put some za'atar on top of this one. You want za'atar on top of yours? No. So I'm gonna do za'atar on one, and then I'm gonna do everything but the bagel on this one. And then the rest I think I'm gonna keep just with the egg, yeah? Okay, so now let's stick it in the oven on 350. Oops, my oven was preheated. Yes, preheated. I'm gonna stick it in. I'm gonna put my timer on. I always remember to put my timer on because I think I'll remember to take it out, but I usually don't. So now that the timer's on, it's gonna beep and I'm gonna remember to take it out. I put it on for 30 minutes. I'm gonna check it. Because my challahs aren't that large, it should be ready in 30 minutes on 350. If I need more time, I'll just hang around and make sure that I'm here to keep checking. You can keep the light on also, so that you can, whoops, wrong light, so that you can keep an eye on the challah. And there you have it.